EA has glorified the removal of loot boxes before by announcing, like, we are happy to announce that loot boxes won't be in Battlefield or Battlefront and yada yada yada, but with FIFA, that's the one golden goose that gets special treatment, and Eurogamer aptly points this out. It seems hypocritical, I think, that EA would, on one hand, say all these things about their strategy for one game or games, and then do a completely different thing for FIFA. How do you justify that disconnect? And the justification Chris Bruzzo, the EA executive that was interviewed, provided was that, well, games are different from one another. They all have different requirements, different game with a different set of decisions and different circumstances. There is nothing particularly special about FIFA that makes it more prone and more suited to have gambling implemented into it. Yes, different games have different sets of requirements, but gambling certainly isn't one of them, and certainly isn't a thing that makes the game more fun, more enjoyable. Bruzzo then notes how many people play FIFA. 100 million people played FIFA in some form or another last year. We have a huge fan base of players who love the mode the way it's set up today, and they love every aspect of it. Most people tolerate what's there because FIFA is the only way they can have a FIFA video game experience. EA has sort of a monopoly on soccer video games, soccer simulation games. Essentially, it's the most authentic experience you can have, but EA shoves the gambling in there, knowing the huge player base that they have, and knowing that they can be taken advantage of, because these are fans who, you know, have an emotional connection to the players that they're gambling for. And I'm not saying that there aren't people who genuinely love these games, but this guy is just outright dismissing the many people who are getting sick and tired of the FIFA formula and its implementation of gambling and its awful, egregious, greedy monetization systems. Bruzzo then tries to play the victim. Your article so far has generated over 220 comments. Some of them keep me up at night. It is tough to sometimes feel like the work that the dedicated people are putting into the game is so easily dismissed, specifically pointing out that, you know, there are real developers, real people working on this game, and how a lot of vitriol is directed at them. But Eurogamer points out there is no ill will directed at the designers of the gameplay, the people we see when they do the preview presentations, the people who are designing gameplay changes, and the way the modes function in a changing from year to year way. It's about the monetization, it's about loot boxes and the way they work. It might be about the people who are making the decisions. Hit the nail on the head when I criticize FIFA. I know that the ground floor developers are just doing what they're supposed to do. I don't blame the ground floor developers. I blame the scumbag greedy executives who are at the core of these decisions that drive the direction of FIFA games, that drive the fact that they're essentially a soccer-themed casino. The decision makers, the higher-ups, the managers, the directors, the executives, these are the people who the anger and the backlash is being directed at, and rightfully so, because what they're doing is really scummy. Now, Bruzzo tries to claim here that that's a difference without a distinction, actually. These are all real people, and so am I, an executive of EA. We should be treated like people, too. Well, you gotta give respect in order to get it back, and the decision makers at EA, the decision makers behind FIFA, clearly do not respect people enough to consider the damage that FIFA is doing psychologically and financially. Even with all the research that's out there telling them that, with government officials telling them, hey, you gotta stop this is getting too much, FIFA keeps fighting back and trying to maintain the status quo because it makes them money. That's what it's always about. It may be convenient to separate the developers from everyone else. It's actually not real. Yes, it is absolutely real. Executives make millions of dollars, and they're the ones who get to steer the ship. You guys have power that the ground floor developers don't. The ground floor developers are just doing what they're supposed to do, but at the end of the day, the commands come from the top. It's the people at the top saying, implement those loot boxes. Regardless of whether ground floor developers think that's good or bad for the game, they gotta follow those directions. For this man to claim that the gap between ground floor developers and decision makers, executives, is a difference without a distinction is complete bullshit. They're very different roles, they're very different circumstances, and the reason people have a tough time seeing executives as human beings is because they behave in the most inhumane ways, dishing out bullshit and implementing whatever shady business scheme in order to raise those stock prices to please investors. These are people who use human beings as cattle for monetization rather than seeing people that they're selling their products to as real human beings who are affected by these products, and in the case of FIFA, oftentimes psychologically and financially negatively. Then when directly asked why have loot boxes in FIFA in the first place, the response Bruiser provided was, we want to strengthen the connection between the real-world sport and the game. In the real world, you don't purchase loot boxes for the chance to earn players and then add them to your team, and then, like, loot boxes come nowhere in play in the real world. That's purely a video game thing. Progress, engagement, this builds just like it does in the real world season. We have created these things over a long period of time to actually mirror what it feels like, the tough strategic choices you have to make when you're putting a squad together that works uniquely as the squad you want to manage, that you want to play with. That's why it all fits together the way it does. And let's not forget, there's a transfer market. There is nothing strategic about purchasing loot boxes. You throw a bunch of money and pray that the results are what you want it to be. Hell, at least in poker, you got a chance to play the player, whereas with loot boxes, there's no way to play the system. You throw some money at it and hope for the best. That's not strategy. Those aren't tough choices. Okay, now get this. Eurogamer pointed out you're buying gameplay affecting items. Your loot box contains players you use and play in a competitive multiplayer mode. And Chris Bruzo responded, just like real football. Excuse me? In real life, teams don't go out and gamble for the chance and hope that they get a specific player. They buy players outright, directly. They have a set price point, and there's negotiations involved. Also, FIFA is a video game. It doesn't 100% have to simulate real life. The first priority of a video game is that it should be fun. That's why player characters run at 40 miles per hour in video games and don't truly simulate the actual natural walking or running speed in real life, because that makes the game less tedious and more fun. That's what FIFA needs to pursue. Sure, the mechanics of playing the soccer game, that being as close to real life as possible, that's all good and well, but if you start adding elements of real life that diminish the game's fun factor, then we got a problem. And when it comes to gambling and having to choose between paying a lot of money or wasting a lot of time in order to get a certain player that has such a low probability of being earned that most players will never earn this player from FIFA packs, like that should not be a feature in a game if it diminishes the fun factor, and many will agree that it absolutely does. And yeah, Eurogamer points out, in real football, you don't buy a loot box and you get what players you get. You go out and buy a player directly if you can afford it. With card packs, Eurogamer notes there are probabilities involved. You don't know who you're gonna get. That's not real football. Look how Bruzo then deflects here. Let me be very, very clear about this point. 9 out of 10 FIFA Ultimate Team packs that are open in FIFA are open with coins. Coins are earned by playing the game. That's not real world money. I love how he has no comeback for Eurogamer's retort on his point that FIFA Ultimate Team is like real football, which it absolutely isn't. So he then shifts to statistics. While most people buy FIFA card packs with coins, most packs purchases aren't made with real money. But Eurogamer aptly argues, but the point is you can pay to win in this game. You can spend real money, and it is a much faster way to do so. The game entices and lures players into money spending. Bruzo responded, so interesting how we just gloss over the fact that 9 out of 10 FIFA Ultimate Team packs are open with coins. And it's so funny that you, Bruzo, gloss over the fact that 1 out of 10 FIFA card packs being open with real money is a significant sum. We're talking about millions upon millions of packs that are opened with real money. This is the equivalent of somebody trying to argue that alcoholism isn't a real issue because only a minority of drinkers are alcoholics. It's like if that person said, it's like you're dismissing the fact that most people who drink alcohol aren't alcoholics, but there are enough people who fall into the depths of alcoholism that this is an issue worth bringing up, and that's why alcohol is regulated, because it can be dangerous, and gambling and loot boxes are similar in that way, where they can prove to be dangerous to, sure, a minority of players, but a significant minority. Eurogamer clapped back with, you can pay to win in FIFA, how can you deny that? Bruzo responded, in real world football, you can use resources to assemble the best squad possible, and in our video game, you can use either FIFA Ultimate Team coins or FIFA points, and 9 out of 10 packs are open with FIFA Ultimate Team coins, which are earned by players who are playing the game. And the other really important thing is that 78% of all FIFA 21 players never spend anything in the game, Wes. Yes, real-world football is a business. A video game should not be a business within itself. It should just be a video game. Does that not go through your heads? We don't want real football business elements within our football video game. And even then, we're not even talking about equivalences here, because the real money aspect of the FIFA video games is gambling, an aspect that isn't reflective of how real football works. So just all of his points fall apart like a house of cards. And here he comes again with the statistics. The majority of players never spend anything in a game. So what, the 22% who do don't matter just because 22 is a smaller number than 78%? Not to mention that 22% is still a significant percentage. And given the player base of FIFA, we're talking millions, tens of millions of people. And when Eurogamer once again repeated, the point is you can pay your way, and many people do. Bruzo's response was, and that's called choice. That's called player choice. Players have a choice. What choice? You were the ones who implemented loot boxes even though people didn't want it. And what choices are there? There are two evils to choose from. You either grind for years and years and likely will never earn the specific players that you're looking for to make your dream team, or you spend a ludicrous amount of money in the hopes that you get the player that you want before you spend too much, before you get addicted, before your brain gets hooked to the dopamine release that can be caused by this gambling feature. That's like saying this bully did nothing wrong because the victim at least had a choice between getting their lunch taken or having their money taken. And then when Bruzo was asked, they have the choice to what, pay to win? Bruzo responded with, well, we have heard your concerns and we have been taking active steps to mitigate some of what's perceived as the harmful nature of FIFA, so we have put probabilities in our packs. Saying a player has a less than 1% chance of being earned tells you absolutely nothing. Less than 1% could mean 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a billion. You don't know, and that's a big difference. He then touts how we launched FIFA Playtime, which is a feature in game that allows you to track your playtime and spending and place limits and whatever, but FIFA games don't promote this feature. They don't warn of the dangers of loot boxes and that these limits should be set. That's there as a little bone to throw to the encroaching government officials and regulators. But the question ultimately is FIFA, is EA doing enough to prevent the issue of players spending too much, of getting addicted to what is essentially gambling? And the answer is a resounding no. They're fighting back against government officials who are attempting to regulate this stuff. They're doing everything in their power to give off this image that loot boxes are fun, surprise mechanics. They're doing the bare minimum to make it seem like they're being proactive. But are they actually being truly proactive? I think most would argue, hell no. And that's the opinion that I have. Bruzo also insisted that the pay-to-win argument is irrelevant because this is a game of skill. If I had the very best squad in FIFA Ultimate Team, I would lose to you every single time. It's about skill, he